So are we warming up for the Noodle Olympics or something, or are we going to get this track done? Chop, chop.
Really? Okay, so here's the rub. As a guitar player in a home studio, the guitar player in me is often at odds with the producer in me. As a guitar player, I set certain goals for myself. I want to create the most creative parts possible, and I want to be able to nail them in as few takes as possible, much like a session player. But because I assume multiple roles in my productions, that producer side of me is frustrated and just is always looking for efficiencies to get these tracks done. So what I've decided to do for this video is write and produce a track specifically for this video where it was time limited, and I had to create efficiencies just to get it done. And sadly, for the guitar player in me, that might mean leaving some of this equipment behind. We'll see how that turns out. So I'm going to take you through the process and share with you the things that I learned and how I got this track done and where I saved a lot of time and really created some flexibility for the production, but ultimately those efficiencies that I was looking for in an effort just to get these tracks done a lot faster. All right, let's jump in and see how it all came together. So this is the sweet spot for me when I'm writing and recording my songs. I have a bunch of little mini projects. If I just had like a riff idea, I'll just lay it down. But once I start pushing forward with something, when a few things are starting to work together, I'll be sitting here with my guitar. Actually, I write a lot on bass as well. I mean, guitar is my principal instrument, but I write a lot on bass guitar because my music is very rhythmically oriented. So drums and bass working together are really critical for me. But I'll be sitting here working out the parts. I'll figure out the tempo of the project, and then I'll start laying things in. I'll cut and paste, move the whole thing around with the objective of getting my bass and drums working really well. The guitar at this point is plugged directly into the interface, and it's just meant to be a guide. I have no intention of keeping it. But this is really the big mistake that I've made in terms of being efficient, because the producer in me is asking, well, if you've already recorded your guitar, why do you need to do it again? Because the guitar player in me wants to go and use my real amplifiers, and that's typically what I do for all of my productions, plugins and things like that. Come into play once in a while, but mainly at the guide stage. So this is really a mind shift for me, and something that has really started to work and it's really a quick little mind shift because it really doesn't change the process. When I'm recording, I'm using an Amp Sim as a guide. I generally don't give a lot of thought into the tones and the pickups and the guitars at this stage, but now I do, because we're going to record really good DI tracks. If we've got time in our session and we want to record our amps, I'm going to try and do that every time when possible. But for the spirit of this project and being efficient, I want to make sure that I have good DI tracks available. So that means making sure our levels are good, making sure we're using the guitar and the pickup that we think will work best for the part. And if I'm copying, pasting, and punching in, and as the bass and drums start to come together, making sure that the guitar is working, it's all sketch stuff, right? But what I'm left with, if I do it this way, are going to be really, really good DI tracks. So later in the session, if I find myself with time, I could consider re-recording some of the guitars. But if I don't have the time, the producer's breathing down my neck, we've got some really good DI tracks to work with, and that's really going to help with the efficiency of the project. It's always going to be about great guitar performances. I don't want to compromise, because the end result, well, you're going to hear it at the end, but make sure you're recording DI tracks, good DI tracks all of the time. It's going to give you a lot of options as you get into the next stages. So when considering efficient workflows, one thing that's important is that we don't want to allow efficiency to kill creativity, because experimentation is really central to being creative, right? So what I've done in the context of this project and the time that I've allocated for it was some time for experimentation. So I wanted to look at the electric guitar as an acoustic instrument. This guitar right here is actually my very first electric guitar. I still have it. And long before I had an amplifier, I used to record this guitar in the bathroom. I had this portable tape recorder, and I would rest the guitar on the counter in the bathroom, and it would resonate, I guess, through the countertop, and then the little portable tape recorder would pick up those sounds. And so I decided to experiment to see what I can come up with, see if we can find some usable parts, and take this guitar into the bathroom and relive some childhood memories. doesn't really sound so great, but I got to play around with it a little bit in that little allocation of experimental time, and then using compression and delay and this very precision EQ, came up with a really interesting part that I think will complement this song. You know, I think that would be an interesting topic to cover. I'll dive deeper into how to turn a guitar into something that sounds like a different instrument. If that sounds like something you're interested in, why don't you let me know in the comments. So the other thing I wanted to do was just mic up an electric guitar in the studio. So sitting here in the studio, I grabbed one of my other guitars and just literally mic'd it up, just captured the natural sound from the strings just to see what we'd get. Utilizing some different techniques, a lot of compression, EQ, lots of reverb, I turned this recorded guitar sound, which really wasn't that great, into something that sounded quite interesting. So as you search for your own efficient workflow, we don't want to kill creativity. It's important, but anyone who owns a home studio knows that we can work on songs for days, for weeks, for months, even years. And honestly, I think we kill the essence of that song if we just cook it for too long, right? I think sometimes it's really good to improve our skills in allocating a specific amount of time to get a job done, because that's how it works in the real world. So figure out those efficiencies, but make sure you're not killing your creativity too. Allow for some experimentation, because sometimes some really cool ideas can come out of that as well. And that was integral to this session. All right, so the producer has twisted my arm, and we're going to keep the DI recorded track. So I've actually recorded a double track, as I often do. I was mindful of the guitar I was using and the pickups I was using. I've used a bridge pickup for one take. I've done a neck pickup on another pass. And they're not, actually this song, they're not completely double track. Parts of them are, but the parts actually sort of change a little bit. So kind of an interesting effect. We'll hear that in the mix. One advantage of using DI guitar tracks is the ability to pre-process them to give you consistent levels ahead of amp simulation and other processing, making them easier to mix into your song. I go through the takes and isolate the quiet sections by creating edit points and then using clip gain to bring the levels closer to the other parts of the take. All DAWs have a clip gain feature. Sometimes it's simply called gain. You can use fades if an edit point sounds too jarring. A plugin I often use at the first stage of DI bass and guitars is DI Fix from United Plugins. This is a great tool to control dynamics and enhance the quieter parts of the signal. You could also use a bit of gentle compression if you don't have DI Fix. Just be mindful that the guitar is a very dynamic instrument, so you don't want to overprocess it. Just enough to balance the levels throughout the take, nothing more. So in terms of tone, because we are going DI, I've decided to use the Tonex plugin. I've featured Tonex on my channel on quite a few videos, actually. I'll put some links in the description. That's from IK Multimedia. Now you can capture your own amplifier. I've done all sorts of things like that, but there's some really, really great captures that come packaged with Tonex. So I've gone with, I believe, a Bugera and a Soldano double track to come up some really big high gain tones. Then from there, I'll do the normal processing that I would do whether I recorded a real amp, or in this case is a DI, but the same mix techniques that I would use for guitars. I've actually done a whole video on EQing heavy guitars. I'll also link that in the description if you want to check that out. Now, same thing with the solos here. Guitar players will often comp their solos. You know, I like to set my solos, I'll work them out, but I was doing that in sort of the process of writing. And then once I had a few good takes, I comped them together. And I actually have two solos in this song. And same process, editing, using the clip gaining and using the DI Fix plugins to get nice fat little DI signals. And we are going to be processing them with the Amp Sim plugin. Now here's the thing, given the time, we can also reamp. So if I do want to introduce real tube amps into the mix, I can actually do that with reamping, and I'm going to cover that in a separate video. But with good DI tracks, you can use plugins, you can use real amps later on through reamping. It gives you a lot of great options, and it makes the producer happy because we've saved a lot of time. We actually don't have to go back and re-record everything. Well, now that everything's in, everything's recorded, all that's left to do is mix the song. And seeing as though this is not a mixing tutorial, I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me mix the song. So through the magic of editing, you can hear the final track right now. Well, there you have it. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, on the song and the process, and ultimately maybe even the sounds that it came up with. Does it sound like a natural production? Does it sound engineered to you? Would love to hear your thoughts. That's what the comment section is for. Now, really doesn't matter what instrument you play. If you're like me and you have a home studio, you've been through it, you've just spent far too long on a track. And I think if we spend too long on it, we lose the essence of what we're trying to do. There's something to be said about coming up with a plan, just writing the best song you can, and just getting it done in as short amount of time as possible. And that's the hardest thing to do, I think, when you have a home studio and you have no limits on time. But it's not good way to practice because in the real world, you've always got limits. So it's a good thing to push yourself to get it done in the shortest amount of time. So let me know what your thoughts. Would love to hear your comments on that. And if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with me, I'm on Patreon. I have affiliate links. I've got merch. It's all in the description, and it all helps the channel, and I really appreciate that. But the most important thing is to check out another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I look forward to seeing you again in another video.